In every era, certain lives stand out, not just for what they accomplished, but for the impact they left on the world around them. Today, we look back at the stories of remarkable individuals whose journeys, passions, and legacies shaped the people who knew them and the audiences who followed their work. These are the voices that defined moments, inspired others, and left behind a mark that time cannot erase. This video brings their stories together, honoring their lives and celebrating everything they gave to their craft, their communities, and the world. Juan Ponce Enrile's life unfolds like an epic political saga stretching across an entire century, shaped by power, loyalty, betrayal, reinvention, and the constant struggle over the future of the Philippines. Born on February 14, 1924, in Cagayan, his beginnings were far from the world of elite politics he would later dominate. Enrile grew up under complex family circumstances, having been the illegitimate son of a lawyer. His early years were marked by hardship, uncertainty, and the need to prove himself in a society defined by social hierarchy. That determination to rise above his circumstances became the engine of a career that would make him one of the most influential and controversial figures in Philippine history. His academic brilliance carried him forward. After excelling in school, he earned a law degree, topping the Philippine bar exam with one of the highest recorded scores. This achievement opened doors into the nation's legal and political spheres, and soon Enrile found himself attracting attention from powerful figures. The most transformative connection of his early career was with Ferdinand Marcos, an ambitious politician who would eventually become the country's most powerful and most polarizing leader. Their alliance would shape the Philippines for decades. Enrile rose through government ranks during Marcos's presidency, becoming Minister of Justice and eventually the long-serving Defense Minister. In these positions he wielded enormous influence over the legal and military machinery of the state. His role during the declaration of martial law in 1972 became a central part of his legacy. Enrile publicly supported the necessity of martial law, arguing that the nation was under threat from communist insurgents and political instability. Critics, however, have long argued that the declaration was part of a carefully orchestrated plan to consolidate dictatorial power. Whether Enrile was a loyal executor of Marcos's vision or a co-author of that authoritarian era has remained a point of fierce debate. For years, Enrile was considered one of Marcos's closest allies. As defense minister, he oversaw the armed forces during a period marked by human rights abuses, military crackdowns, and the centralization of executive power. His position made him feared by some, respected by others, and viewed as indispensable by the ruling government. Yet, beneath the facade of unwavering loyalty, tensions between Marcos and Enrile continued to grow. Political disagreements, shifting alliances, and internal rivalries created fractures that would eventually transform Philippine history. By the mid-1980s, the Marcos regime was under immense pressure. Economic decline, growing opposition movements, and international scrutiny weakened the government. It was during this turbulent period that Enrile made the dramatic move that forever redefined him. In 1986, he and General Fidel Ramos defected from the regime, announcing their withdrawal of support for Marcos. This bold action triggered what became the People Power Revolution, a nationwide uprising that brought millions of Filipinos to the streets, demanding the end of dictatorship. Enrile, once a symbol of martial law, suddenly became a symbol of rebellion against tyranny. His decision contributed directly to Marcos's downfall and the rise of a new democratic era. Following the revolution, Enrile took on influential positions in the restored democratic government under President Corazon Aquino. His relationship with Aquino, however, was fraught with tension. He was accused of involvement in coup attempts and became one of the most polarizing figures of the new administration. Despite the controversies, Enrile's political resilience allowed him to maintain a long and influential career. He held several terms in the Philippine Senate, serving as Senate president and participating in major legislative battles that shaped national policy. Enrile's career also included high-profile legal drama. In 2014, he was arrested on charges of plunder connected to a major corruption scandal involving misuse of public funds. Though he strongly denied wrongdoing, the case revived long-standing criticism of his political tactics and alleged network of patronage. His detention, legal battles, and eventual release on humanitarian grounds became a defining chapter in his later years, raising questions about justice, accountability, and the responsibility of powerful political figures. Yet despite these controversies, Enrile remained active in public life well into his 90s, offering commentary on political events, publishing memoirs, and reinforcing his version of historical events. His longevity, both political and literal, made him a witness to nearly every major transformation of modern Philippine history. From the Japanese occupation to the Marcos regime, from revolution to democracy, from Senate battles to corruption scandals, Enrile not only observed but actively shaped the nation's trajectory. His legacy is deeply complex. Supporters view him as a brilliant legal mind, a seasoned statesman, and a defender of national security during periods of instability. They praise his role in the People Power Revolution and his long service in government. Critics, however, argue that he was one of the architects of authoritarianism, a strategic survivor who shifted allegiance for political advantage, and a figure who benefited from a system of patronage and power imbalance. For many, his life represents the contradictions of Philippine politics, a blend of nationalism and ambition, of public service and political maneuvering, of reform and complicity. In evaluating Juan Ponce Enrile's century-long presence on the national stage, one cannot ignore the impact he left behind. He shaped legislation, military strategy, political alliances, and public discourse. He was instrumental in building a government and in helping dismantle one. His story is a reminder that political history is rarely simple and that individuals can be both agents of progress and symbols of controversy. Enrile's life invites Filipinos to reflect on the nature of leadership, the weight of decisions made in times of crisis, and the complex relationship between power and accountability. As time moves forward, the debates surrounding his legacy will continue. Some will remember him as a statesman, others as a survivor of multiple regimes, and still others as a figure whose actions remain inseparable from the darkest chapters of the nation's past. But regardless of perspective, one fact remains undeniable. Juan Ponce Enrile stands as one of the most influential and unforgettable political figures in the history of the Philippines, a man whose life story captures the dramatic shifts of a nation constantly striving to define its identity. Larry Brooks was a towering figure in hockey journalism, known for his uncompromising voice, deep knowledge of the game, and decades-long coverage of the New York Rangers. Born on February 26, 1950, in New York City, his life became inseparable from the rink, the locker room, and the story behind every play. He began humbly, joining the New York Post in 1975 as a part-time clerk working overnight shift. Very quickly, he moved into reporting, first covering the Islanders in 1976, then later focusing on the Rangers starting in the 1978-79 season. Over his career, he would become synonymous with the Rangers beat, earning the respect of players, coaches, and readers alike. But Brooks's career wasn't only about writing. In the 1980s, he stepped away from journalism to work for the New Jersey Devils organization. From 1982 to 1992, he served as vice president of communications. That experience only deepened his connection to the game and gave him a perspective few beat writers ever have: the inner workings of a franchise. In 1993, he returned to the Post and began writing his iconic weekly Sunday column, Slap Shots. Through that column, Brooks offered insider analysis, sharp takes, and stories no one else dared to write. He didn't just report. He interpreted the game, challenged power, and gave voice to the drama both on and off the ice. His reputation was built on honesty, access, and persistence. As president of the Professional Hockey Writers Association from 2001 to 2003, he pushed for better press access in NHL locker rooms. He believed deeply in letting journalists tell the full story of the sport, not just the sanitized version, and his advocacy helped shape how media and players interact. Brooks's work was formally recognized in 2018 when he received the Elmer Ferguson Memorial Award from the Hockey Hall of Fame, a tribute to his lifetime of distinguished writing about hockey. Through his career, he built relationships with players, coaches, and executives, but also wasn't afraid to speak truth to power. One of his most famous dynamics was with coach John Tortorella. Their confrontations were legendary, yet in later years there was respect and even reconciliation. Brooks earned a reputation as a fierce questioner who always came back the next day, not to pick a fight, but to understand, to challenge, to push for clarity. When he wasn't writing, he was mentoring. He made time for younger reporters, often taking calls from aspiring journalists and sharing insights on covering the beat. His influence extended beyond his own words. He shaped whole generations of sports writers who learned to value access, toughness, and integrity. On November 13, 2025, Larry Brooks passed away after a brief fight with cancer. He was 75 years old. The hockey world responded with an outpouring of tributes, from league officials to players, from colleagues to fans. NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman said Brooks would be remembered not only for his sharp analysis of the Rangers and the NHL, but for how clearly he stood for his belief. More than just a reporter, Brooks was an icon, someone who gave fans a way to connect to the soul of the game. He knew how to write the story, not just the stats. His columns were a bridge between the rink and the reader, and his legacy will last well beyond his years. In the end, Larry Brooks wasn't just a voice in hockey. He was part of what made the game matter to so many people. His work will continue to resonate in the pages of newspapers, in the memories of fans, and in the spirit of Todd Snider's story is one of those rare, winding American musical journeys that feel both larger than life and deeply intimate at the same time. Born on October 11, 1966, in Portland, Oregon, and raised in the suburban landscape of Beaverton, he grew up far from the mythic stages and smoky bars where he would one day carve out his unique place in the world of Americana music. His early life didn't immediately suggest that he would become a troubadour, a wandering storyteller, or a voice of the social outsiders and restless dreamers. Yet even as a kid, something in him gravitated towards storytelling, humor, and the strange poetry of everyday life. He wasn't set on becoming a musician at first. His path was far from straightforward, and like many artists destined to leave an imprint, he spent his youth searching for meaning in the chaos of ordinary days. After finishing high school, he briefly attended Santa Rosa Junior College in California. But the traditional path never fit him, and he soon drifted away from classrooms and into the unpredictable rhythm of travel, self-discovery, and late-night inspiration. Around this time, he picked up the harmonica, an instrument simple in appearance but capable of carrying immense emotional weight. It wasn't yet the life-changing moment, but it was the seed. He was beginning, without realizing it, to assemble the tools he would later use to build a career defined by raw honesty, humor, and a deep connection to the human experience. Everything changed when he found himself in Texas in the late 1980s. Drawn to the culture, the warmth, the strange mix of cowboy romanticism and gritty barroom truth, he settled briefly in San Marcos. And it was there, inside the legendary Green Hall, that his life took the decisive turn. One night he watched Jerry Jeff Walker perform, an artist whose presence embodied the free-spirited, storytelling magic of Americana. As Snider later recalled, something inside him lit up during that show. He realized he didn't need to be a master guitarist or a classically trained singer to move people. He simply needed stories, honesty, and the courage to put himself on a stage. That night, the seed blossomed. Todd Snider walked out of Green Hall knowing he was going to be a songwriter. Chasing that realization, he made his way to Nashville in the early 1990s, stepping into a world of honky-tonks, open mics, and fiercely talented artists all trying to tell their own truth. Nashville can be unforgiving, but it can also be where outsiders find each other, and Snider quickly became part of the growing alternative country scene, what would later be called alt-country or Americana. His music wasn't polished or manufactured. It was warm, sharp, funny, political, reckless, compassionate, and unpretentious. His songs were shaped by people he met on the road, by the stories he overheard in bars, by the ghosts of America's highways. Soon he caught the attention of his heroes. John Prine, Guy Clark, Chris Christopherson, Jerry Jeff Walker, all of them storytellers who could capture a lifetime in a 4-minute song. They didn't just admire him, they embraced him. These men became mentors and friends, shaping his artistic philosophy and strengthening his voice. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, Snider released a string of albums that showcased his ability to balance humor and heartbreak. He could sing about politics with razor-sharp wit, then follow with a tender ballad about broken souls and second chances. He brought a sense of rebellion to his music, gentle rebellion, the kind that comes from questioning society rather than shouting at it. His concerts became legendary for their looseness, their warmth, and the way Snider seemed to talk as much as he sang, weaving stories, jokes, and confessions between his songs until the audience felt like they were spending an evening with an old friend rather than watching a performer on stage. Not content to be shaped by industry expectations, Snider started his own label, Aimless Records, giving him the creative freedom to pursue projects that didn't fit neatly into mainstream categories. Through this label he produced works that blended satire, social critique, and intimate personal reflection. One standout was Peace Queer, an EP full of political commentary that showed his ability to speak truthfully, even when it ruffled feathers. Over time he earned a reputation as a wandering philosopher who wasn't afraid to poke at hypocrisy or offer a laugh in the middle of a storm. His 2021 album, First Agnostic Church of Hope and Wonder, was a bold experiment where Snider played most of the instruments himself: guitars, bass, piano, banjo, and more. It marked a late-career burst of creative energy and proved that even after decades in the industry, he still had something new to say. The album offered a strange, whimsical, yet deeply human exploration of faith, absurdity, and the surreal nature of the modern world. It also hinted at his increasingly complicated relationship with pain, age, and vulnerability. By that time Snider had been living for years with spinal stenosis, a condition that caused chronic, debilitating pain. The physical struggle affected his performances, his daily life, and his emotional well-being. He spoke openly about the challenges, about how pain can shape a person's mind and slow down the body while sharpening the heart. But instead of hiding this struggle, he folded it into his shows, his interviews, and his songs. It made him more human, more relatable, and it reminded fans that behind the humor and charm was a man grappling with his own battles. In 2025, after decades of touring and storytelling, Snider released High, Lonesome and Then Some, an album that felt like a full-circle reflection on everything he had lived through. The record carried themes of aging, fear, spiritual searching, and the fragile beauty of connection. Fans described it as one of his most soulful, introspective works, a project that captured the emotional maturity of a man who had seen the best and worst of life. Just weeks after the album's release, while on tour to support it, tragedy struck. Snider was reportedly the victim of a violent assault outside a hotel in Salt Lake City. Confusion followed. Police statements, conflicting reports, the revelation that he had also been arrested in the hospital for disorderly conduct and making threat. The details were messy, unclear, and heartbreaking, the kind of chaos that often surrounds brilliant but wounded artists. His health deteriorated quickly. His team announced the cancellation of the rest of the tour. The emotional and physical toll had become too great. Then, on November 14, 2025, Todd Snider died at the age of 59. In the days before his death, he had been diagnosed with a form of walking pneumonia, and his condition worsened rapidly. Fans, fellow musicians, and the entire Americana community were stunned. The tributes poured in, words from new artists he had inspired, from old legends he had worked with, from fans whose lives had changed because of a lyric, a joke, or a moment of connection at a show. His label released a statement describing him as an artist who could get to the heart of things with a line or a song, creating words that felt like an old friend or a warm blanket. It was an accurate description. Snider had always possessed a rare ability to turn flawed humanity into something beautiful and comforting. What he left behind was far more than a discography. He left a philosophy. He left a way of seeing the world that embraced imperfection, vulnerability, humor, and empathy. His songs weren't just melodies. They were glimpses into the souls of wanderers, misfits, broken hearts, and hopeful spirits. He collaborated with artists across genres, including Tom Jones, showing how easily he could cross musical boundaries without losing his authenticity. His influence continues to echo through younger songwriters who see him as a blueprint for honesty and artistic independence. Todd Snider lived the life of a true troubadour, messy, meaningful, painful, funny, and wildly human. He never pretended to be something he wasn't. He stood on stage like a man who had lived 1,000 stories and still had 1,000 more he wanted to tell. His music remains a reminder that beauty often hides in the cracks, that laughter and sorrow can live in the same breath, and that sometimes the most powerful art comes from people who are simply trying to survive the world with a guitar, a harmonica, and a little bit of courage. His death marked the end of a remarkable, unconventional life, but his songs will continue to travel, down highways, through radios and speakers, across lonely nights and joyful mornings, wherever people still look for truth wrapped in humor, heartache, and the strange poetry of being alive. As we reflect on these lives, we're reminded that legacies aren't built overnight. They're created through dedication, through authenticity, and through the countless decisions and moments that define a lifetime. Though these individuals are no longer with us, the influence they carried continues to move through the people they touched and the work they leave behind. Their stories don't end here. They live on in memory, in inspiration, and in every person who carries their spirit forward. Thank you for joining us in honoring their lives and preserving their legacy.